We are now going to be joined by J. Michael Waller, who is a senior analyst for strategy at the Center for Security Policy, has his PhD from our very own Boston University, and he is the president also of Georgetown Research, which is a political risk and private intelligence company based out of Washington, D.C. As I mentioned to you before, he's a frequent guest instructor at the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School at Fort Bragg. That's where they trained the Green Berets. Good morning, J. Michael Waller. How are you, sir?
Hey, Chris. Good to be back.
So tell us a little bit here about, I want to do something on what China's been doing here in our country. And I don't think a lot of people realize how influential are the Chinese and how influential they are in getting their message out through our media. Just how successful have they been, in particular with this virus, but with other things as well?
Oh, they're working us really, really hard and really, really well. It took them a while to get their message coordinated and to get their pieces in order because nobody really knew quite what to say or do. But now you see that it's not just the Chinese government propaganda outlets that are giving one message to not blame China, but you're getting everybody from former Obama's ambassador to China to Trevor Noah, all getting together with the very same message to say it's not the Chinese virus, it's the American virus, and it's wrong to accuse China of spreading this virus because viruses have no borders, so let's not hold China responsible.
It's quite extraordinary, really, when you see it. Do they realize what they're doing? I can't know everybody's or what they're in their heart and minds, but I wonder if people in the media even know what they're saying or how they're having their strings pulled. Are they voluntary or are they just stupid?
Well, both. I know some of them. You don't have to be a genius to be a journalist. I'll say that. But the ones who are doing it, the influential ones, know precisely what they're doing. Because if you want to do business in China, you have to do what the Communist Party wants, and that's why you see the certain businesses, big businesses, certain Wall Street connected interests, and media companies that depend on doing business in China or have decided that they want to depend on doing that. They are all saying precisely the same thing, as well as, say, pundits like Max Boot of the Washington Post, who pretends to be a conservative and then a never-Trumper conservative, but right when you get down to it, he supports Joe Biden and once said he would even vote for Stalin. So all of these people together are coming together with the exact same voice, including Max Boot in the Washington Post, who was pushing the exact same things on May 3rd that the Pravda of China, People's Daily, which is a Communist Party daily party line publication, was issuing the exact same propaganda themes as Max Boot was in the Washington Post on the very same day.
Yeah, you can't make that stuff up. It's absolutely incredible. Yeah, Max Boot, he's a great Soviet import, right? I think that's how. Did you refer to him that way?
Yeah, he got really upset with that one.
So folks don't realize Max Boot is not there's many fine people who weren't born in America, but he's not one of them, I don't think. Dr. Waller, we have seen that the Russia investigation is continuing along a pace here, pretty good. This General Flynn, the unmasking of General Flynn, I was talking in the first hour quite a bit about it before we were joined by Congressman Keating, but I was talking about it where we have finally gotten the list of names. Explain to people a little bit why it's so dangerous, the fact that this intelligence, national security intercepts were then leaked to the press, why that's so important.
Oh, well, it's vital. See, we have our foreign intelligence services spy on foreign individuals and entities and governments. They don't spy on Americans. But, of course, when they're collecting intelligence on foreigners or about foreigners, they're inevitably going to come up with something where there's some American citizen involved who's a friend or a contact or something like that. And so when those intelligence products are produced as an analytical report, they'll give the whole report, but they'll black out or redact or substitute a false name for the real name of the American who happens to come up it's like fishing. You're going to get a dolphin every now and then, so you've got to let that one go, and you've got to protect against that. And the same thing in gathering intelligence. So that's what masking is. It masks the identity of the person so that American citizen's name does not come up as an intelligence analytical product. So it takes a special process to unmask that individual, because there might be an analyst or an official somewhere who looks at these and says, "Hey, wait a minute, this individual himself might be a spy or might be a problem. Let's unmask that person and see if we can get down to what the truth is about him." So sometimes it's necessary to do unmasking to get to the bottom of a spy case, and this is how we catch spies. But it's a very strict procedure to prevent our intelligence services from acting like a KGB or some other secret police. The process becomes abused when officials or others unmask people for political purposes, and this is what happened with the Mike Flynn case.
We're speaking with Michael Walsh, who's for the Center for Security Policy. You can go to their website, centerforsecuritypolicy.org. And, of course, you've got some really talented people over there with deep experience, much like your own, at the Center for Security Policy. And so, folks, I encourage you to go there and get an alternative view of what's real, or maybe the real view of what's going on here in the world. And so they took that information and put it out there in an effort to pre-destroy the Trump administration, right?
Yes, that's what it appears to be now. This was not part of a campaign to stop the Russians from interfering in our elections. This began after the election to literally prevent the Trump administration from succeeding in governing the country. So this was deliberate political sabotage of the country after the election.
It's quite extraordinary. I was telling you, it's what goes on in third world countries. We just never expected it would go on here. Maybe that's just naive. And you, of course, have a good sense of history. Is this beginning to look bigger than Watergate?
Oh, absolutely. Watergate was nothing. What was it? A 17-minute gap in a recorded presidential conversation, and then a break-in at a psychiatrist's office, and some political shenanigans against the Democratic National Committee, all of which was bad and illegal. But the real crime of Watergate was that President Nixon covered it up, and he just come out and said, "Oh yeah, I did this. I'll make sure that it doesn't happen again." People would have forgiven him and it would have gone away, but what made it a huge scandal was the cover-up. In the Obama case, it's different. The Obama administration was weaponizing our entire intelligence community against American citizens and against American political presidential candidates, and then the president-elect and his team to prevent him from governing. This is subversion.
It's so big that it's hard to get your head around, and that's why it's important, I think, to have on folks such as yourself who have a background in propaganda and in subversion and in understanding how it's done and what happens with it. Now, the idea that they were going around calling the President of the United States a spy, a Russian asset, right? And I mean, people from our highest intelligence levels, Clapper to included, saying that the President of the United States Donald Trump was a Russian asset. Did that help or hurt the political goals of the Putin administration?
It really helped the Putin administration, because Vladimir Putin was no longer a big player on the world stage by this time. He's so isolated in Russia. He has the oligarchs against him, which he needs them all to be for him. He had to prevent the governors. There are 88 governors, sort of the equivalent of states, like oblasts they're called in Russia. 88 of them, and they all have their own governor who were elected by the public. He changed that and said, "Nope, I'm going to fire any governor who defies me, and I'm going to appoint my own governor instead." So he was having his grip on control in Russia was slipping, and as a world leader, he was a nothing. He was a pariah, and he looked like a weakling. And in Russia, you can't look like a weakling. That's just not what the culture is. Once you look like a weakling, you're a goner. What the Obama administration did was make Putin look all-powerful and make him look like a huge world player to the point that he could determine the next president of the United States.
No, it's unbelievable, folks. So the man speaks of. He knows what he speaks of. His doctoral dissertation he wrote in '93 was published as The Secret Empire, the KGB in Russia Today, which foresaw the rise of KGB intelligence officers to seize political control in Russia. That's one of the things that Dr. Waller is an expert in Russian activities and subversion here in America. He's been testifying in front of Congress since the 80s on the different networks, some of which my listeners belong to, and whether they realized it or not, over the years to help push Soviet policy through the peace movement and things like that. But have you ever seen a more successful propaganda operation in favor of the Russians as the one put on by the Obama administration?
Well, it certainly ranks way up there. It's the only reason I hesitate to be more definitive is I want to see more proof that this was directed by the Russian government. I haven't seen that yet. I see how it was done in ways that helps Putin, but I haven't seen that smoking gun that Putin's people gave the orders to do it. I won't be surprised at all if certain people are arrested as, say, certain former senior FBI people are arrested as Robert Hansen types. Remember, Robert Hansen was that senior FBI agent who was a Russian spy, very trusted counterintelligence officer, who I knew really well. I knew his whole family.
Really?
And yeah. And the way he described the FBI, he said, you wouldn't believe this corrupt cabal of people coming up through the system. He was right. He was telling the truth. But he was still a Russian spy and a traitor. So I wouldn't be surprised. I would expect that there are many more Robert Hansens within the FBI. First of all, because the FBI is one of the Russians' prime targets to recruit and compromise and turn counterintelligence officers who are the spy hunters against what the Russians are doing here, first of all. Secondly, the FBI counterintelligence itself is very poor. You look at who they're arresting, and they're making a lot of arrests, and they're doing a good job at the field office level, and they just had a bust in Boston in January, a big bust of Chinese spies, three of them so far. They couldn't call them spies because of our laws aren't up to date, but they're Chinese spies, according to the terms of their arrest. So but these are professors and researchers and that kind of thing, meaning they're the worker bees in the spy operation. But you don't see any arrests of senior politicians or senior officials or other senior people who were recruited and burrowed in, because it's very, very hard to find them, and it takes years and years and years of hard work. So it's more productive for a professional level, for agents to some of them want to go after the low-hanging fruit. They're called scalp hunters within the Bureau. They'll just arrest anybody who can be a spy, and that's great because we need to have them arrested and busted. There are most of them are professionals who simply want to bust spies and get the bad guys at whatever level, but there is pressure to produce, and the FBI's resources are such that they don't have enough to invest in going after running sophisticated, very many years-long operations to bust up a whole borrowed-in network, like they did with Operation Ghost Stories, which came to public about 10 years ago. A brilliant operation that broke up a network of 10 very deep-cover Russian spies. So that Anna Chapman case, the TV show The Americans about the Russian spies, okay, that was that case. It was a brilliant FBI case, but we don't have enough of those types of cases because it's very resource-intensive. And then you have others who are politicized, and they don't want to look at certain people. And this is where the trouble comes in inside the Bureau. This is a very small minority, but they have managed to organize themselves as part of the FBI's central nervous system, telling the rest of the Bureau what to do. So I wouldn't at all be surprised to see one or two of those senior FBI officials whose names are public knowledge to be indicted as a Russian spy.
Wow, that's incredible. That is incredible. And I didn't realize you knew Hansen, and that's just a fascinating, tragic story between he and Alder James. How many people did they get killed over the years? And folks, just so you know that he's talking about the Americans television show, much of that spy network was right here in Massachusetts, right?
Oh, in Boston, yeah.
Yeah.
Massachusetts is a huge target for Russian and Chinese and other spies because of all the science and technology and advanced education that's going on, and financial activity that's going on in the city and in the area. So it's been a massive target, well, since the British occupation in the 1700s.
That's right. Now, just to refresh our listeners' memories, if they don't know. So when the FBI rolled up those spies, which the investigation started under George W. Bush's administration, then they rolled up and they were taken into custody during the Obama administration. What ended up happening to those Russian spies, Dr. Waller?
Well, think of this. These are high-value spies. Okay, they were young spies. Most of them were in their 30s. They speak perfect American English. They're very talented and very devoted. So some of them, these spies, got married to one another for the purpose of spying and looking like and living like real married couples. So they didn't do it out of love for one another. They did it out of love for spying and accomplishing their mission. This was the cream of the crop of Russia's new generation of spies, blended right in with false identities. And they called it ghost stories because some of them took the identities of babies who had died in infancy. So you got the birth certificates and social security numbers and just use those identities. So normally you would keep those spies, and you'd keep them for years until you could work out a trade to get something back that you really wanted. So these are 10 top talented Russian spies. The Obama administration gave them back within a couple of weeks. It was a shocking spy swap to get them out of town and give them back to Putin. They have never explained why they did that. So you have these 10 top-notch spies, and we got 4 back in return, one of whom was a Russian researcher who wasn't a spy at all, one of whom was a very elderly spy who, okay, it's very nice humanitarian gesture to get him back, but you don't trade your best pieces for someone like that. And then the others were British, 2 British, and they weren't even our people. So we got nothing out of the deal. And then that one British spy, he was a Russian military intelligence colonel, ended up getting the polonium treatment, the spy treatment, the assassination treatment, rather, in London, and almost died.
No, it's
so
absolutely
they went
incredible.
and assassinated the guy they traded back. This would never be before. If say what you will about the Russians and the KGB and everything else, there is an honor code there, meaning if you do a spy swap, the people being swapped are immune from ever being pursued again. And they even busted the rules on that, and the Obama administration didn't say boo.
It's incredible, right? Reminds me of something James Forrestal once said. If we're all making mistakes, some will be in our favor. Right. So before,
he didn't do too well, did he?
No. Don't go to Bethesda. The final thing I want to, because I'm just fascinated by this, by what we're doing here. And again, folks, you can learn a lot more here by going to the centerforsecuritypolicy.org. We're speaking with J. Michael Waller, PhD, and a New Hampshire native, I believe, right?
Yeah, I'm up in New Hampshire right now. In fact, my cell service didn't work, and so when I was expected to go on earlier, I never got the signal until 10 minutes later. So
that's fine. Yeah. That's fine. So,
it's good to be back in New England.
No, it's when we're glad to have you. We feel safer because you're here. We have, but go to centerforsecuritypolicy.org. But Dr. Waller, recently we had a member of this community named Jose Soler who passed away, and it's always sad when people die. But his obituaries were everywhere. He was given an award by the Massachusetts Teachers Association, all kinds of good stuff. And they never mentioned in his obituary his Communist Party affiliation, although he was quite proud of it. And he gave all his papers to the W.E.B. Du Bois Library at UMass Amherst, that's not a coincidence. And about all his communist activity, but But his friends and family, I don't know whether they didn't realize this, but they put in there his prominence in the U.S. Peace Council. The U.S. Peace Council. And so I just wondered if you, with your expertise on Russian subversion in America, could just highlight for people, this man was co-director of the U.S. Peace Council at one time. Explain to people what the U.S. Peace Council was at the time and is probably to this day. Explain to people what that really is.
Well, the U.S. Peace Council was one of the most important and influential Soviet front organizations for active measures in the United States. It was a 100% created and controlled instrument of the Soviet government. It was a part of the Soviet Communist Party's international apparatus and under the operational control of the KGB. Anyone who was running the U.S. Peace Council, because they did depend on dupes to make them look clean, but anyone who was in a senior position knew precisely what they were doing. Especially if they were Communist Party members, they were loyal, they were vetted, and they would always change their positions in accordance with what the Soviets told them to do. So this guy was a witting, purposeful Soviet agent all his life until his dying day. He was still loyal to the Kremlin. And so and then the fact that he would give his papers to the W.E.B. Zoy's library, well, that was the name of a communist activist from earlier in the 20th century, and they even had communist youth groups named after him, W.E.B. Du Bois clubs. I mean, this guy was a hardcore Stalinist. He stayed with the Soviets through Brezhnev and Andropov and everything else. And the U.S. Peace Council was an instrument here to undermine American defenses. So he was working with people like Sandra Graham, who was then a member of the Cambridge, Massachusetts City Council, and with Howard Zinn at Boston University, and a whole lot of other communist agents and fellow travelers were working to influence Massachusetts journalism. Think of some of the media outlets in Massachusetts, your radio station not among them. At universities, Boston University, Harvard University, UMass, so many others, and think of their tilt. Now, you mentioned he got an award from the Massachusetts Teachers Association. Mm-hmm. Why would a lifelong Communist Party propagandist and subversion operative be honored by a teachers association? Because his job was to influence the kids.
Right.
And
by the way, he ran the UMass Dartmouth Labor Center. He got a public pension. He was running the UMass Dartmouth Labor Center here for years, and he was a KGB operative.
Right, changing. We wonder why the 250th anniversary of the Boston Massacre went by, and they're whining about racism and reparations for Native Americans and slaves, not about the principles for which Crispus Attucks and these others were killed that day in 1770. That went by with almost nobody saying a word. Outside Boston, but the rest of the country didn't hear a thing. But those inside Boston, you saw the governor and others, and they're surrounded by these people whining about race, and then changing the Massachusetts state seal to take Massasoit off the state seal because it's racist. I mean, come on! This is how our whole understanding of the American Revolution and founding principles was completely subverted and twisted over the past 50 years. So it's nothing like it was. People have no understanding of it anymore. And younger people think we're a racist society based on hate and exploitation, and we have no value as a country. That's the ultimate in Russian subversion of our system, when we cease believing in ourselves. And that's what this old communist agent was doing all his life in Massachusetts.
It's really, really incredible. Well, we will let you go. I do appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us here and giving us once again a solid education and some background here, so we can go forward and make informed decisions. I appreciate you. I really, really appreciate your time and your dedication to our country. Quite frankly, Dr. Waller. Have a wonderful day. Thanks again.
Thanks. It's great to be back.